So this will be our presentation for the Module 5 Collaborative Project. I'll be talking about Dr. Gay's presentation on culturally responsive teaching, reasons, rhetoric, and reality. Continuing under the 6 salient qualities of culturally responsive teaching, the first I want to talk about is understanding how learners construct knowledge. Dr. Gay discusses that school achievement is accomplished with more than just academics. So following culturally responsive teaching involves supporting students in other areas. An example she gave was that a student under stress is less able to focus on a task. Stereotype threat is the idea that students of color feel stress about fulfilling stereotypes of their race or culture. So stereotype is one source of increased stress for students. Dr. Gay also discusses that changing the curriculum is important for CLR, but it is not sufficient. We cannot achieve culturally responsive teaching just by changing our curriculum. It needs to be integrated into all aspects of the classroom. And some examples she gives are assessment and classroom management. She also states all subjects can involve diversity, including math and science. As far as learning about student lives, Dr. Gay discusses the idea that some say teaching students about their own cultures is separationist. She disagrees. She believes that teaching about different cultures is a way to unify us and help us get to know each other. So learning about our students' cultures is a very important part of culturally responsive teaching. For the topic being socioculturally conscious, Dr. Gay states it is important to understand students beyond the rhetoric. As teachers, we need to acknowledge the realities that our students face every day. She emphasizes that being culturally responsive is much more than just reading ideas on the page. We have to accept the realities that our students experience every day and respond to that when we interact with them. She also discusses the idea that economics do not nullify racism. So, to continue this idea, people of color who are middle and upper class still experience racism. She also states CLR can be applied in all communities, even isolated communities, which are communities without racial diversity, as well as international communities with ethnic identities that we do not recognize in Western culture. The example she gives is China, which we would consider everyone from China to be one singular ethnic identity, when in fact they recognize more than 50 ethnic identities. So CLR can apply very well there if you understand the ethnic viewpoint of that country or community. For the next topic, holding affirming views about diversity, Dr. Gay discusses that a common misconception about culturally responsive teaching is that it asks us to be colorblind. Dr. Gay explains that it is impossible to bypass color and impossible to look at someone and not see color. So, culturally responsive teaching does not subscribe to this viewpoint that we should be colorblind and not recognize the realities that we experience every day related to our race. Cultural responsiveness is relevant in all communities as the definition of person of color is getting more complex and all teachers will inevitably encounter diversity throughout their career. So she states that it is not adequate for someone to say this isn't important for me because we can't assume that we will never encounter diversity in our classroom. She also states it is important to acknowledge that people cannot help but be cultural, as culture is what people do in their everyday lives. She explains that this is important for teaching because culture affects all parts of life, including school. And for the topic using appropriate instructional practices, Dr. Gay explains that CLR needs to be comprehensive in the classroom. It needs to be incorporated to all aspects of the classroom. Again, an example of this would be content, classroom management, curriculum. Anyways, Dr. Gay states that you cannot do what has always been done. It is clear that past practices have not supported all students and changes need to be made. So Dr. Gay discusses that what we did in the past obviously did not support many groups of students. So we cannot keep doing that. Lastly, Dr. Gay describes how some may feel that they cannot incorporate CLR because the magnitude of learning about racial diversity is too much for them. She disagrees and states that becoming culturally responsive is a developmental process that requires practice. I really like the example that she used for comparison, which is reading. Just like reading, you don't need to be a master at it before you begin doing it. It takes lots of practice and learning and mistakes to be able to become a master at CLR. So that is everything that I have to talk about for Dr. Gaze.
Hi. So my presentation that I viewed was on Doing Culturally Responsive Education, What It Takes by Dr. Sonia Nieto. And in her presentation, she basically discusses what it takes to be a culturally responsive teacher. She talks about that all teachers need to love all aspects of teaching in order to be a culturally responsive teacher, just because if you are struggling in a certain area with your teaching, you're going to have a harder time being open to being culturally responsive. So you really have to fine-tune all those areas and look at yourself as a teacher and make sure that you feel comfortable. That way you can open yourself to being a culturally responsive teacher. When you are open and you can engage your students, you get a lot more from your students. So that's why it's so important to be open so that you can be a culturally responsive teacher and engage them while you're teaching. Another point she made was to make sure students can be who they are. Let them feel comfortable being who they are, so that way that they're open to learning. If they're not comfortable, they might shut down, they might have a wall up, they may not be receptive to learning, so it's important to always keep a classroom environment comfortable and welcoming to all cultures and every aspect of the student themselves. The main point of her presentation was going into the 5 qualities of being a culturally responsive teacher. First quality is valuing language and culture. So teachers should be able to value the language that the students speak. Not all students are going to have the same first language, or maybe some students know multiple languages. So it's understanding what language they feel comfortable with and what language they identify more with, so that you can kind of bring that into your teaching. You obviously don't have to speak the language, but maybe as a teacher you could learn some phrases to encourage your students. So let's say you have a student who speaks Mandarin and you learned how to say good job in Mandarin. That one little step, going that extra step, can help encourage your student that much more, because they understand that you're taking the time to learn about them, and so that they may work harder for you. Another part is understanding their culture. All of us have different cultural backgrounds, and we identify with different cultures, and it's important to understand where your students come from, how they identify or who they identify with, and what makes them feel comfortable. Because if you can kind of incorporate their culture into your teaching, they will be more engaged, they're more willing to learn, and they feel more comfortable. So that was a big point that she made. The second quality is insisting on high quality and excellent work from all students. So as a teacher, you really want to have those high expectations for your students so that you're not setting low expectations, because if that's what you do, that's what they're going to strive for. You want your student to strive for the highest expectation, and even if they don't meet it, you give them the tools to eventually meet it, or get to their goal. Set a goal and reach it, versus just giving a low expectation and letting them meet it, because they won't work harder for you. You really want them to work hard, and you want to engage them and help them meet that goal, and not set them up for failure, but set them up for success. The third quality was honoring family. So it's important to incorporate family life. As a teacher, you should be communicating with the families if possible, making that connection, creating a bond. That way you can bridge that gap of home life to classroom life, because they are very important to the students growing up and their life, and it's important to know what's going on at home, being able to tell parents what's going on in the classroom, what you're seeing, and how the student is interacting with other students, or just interacting with you and letting them know what's going on. So it's important to have that bond with families. The fourth quality is exemplifying a commitment to lifelong learning. So as teachers, we go through school and we think we're done, but in reality, we're not done. We're still learning. We're learning every day when we're working with those students, and you need to keep learning. We need to adapt to our students and what's happening. So in order to do so, we still need to take classes, do workshops, do whatever you can to keep your learning going. The fifth quality, the last quality, was engaging in critical self-reflection. So teachers need to be able to really reflect critically upon themselves as a teacher and what they bring to the classroom. You have to be open-minded as a teacher and be able to self-analyze what you're doing. So if something is going on in the classroom and you're not able to understand what it is, and you kind of look at all aspects of what it is, and you find out that it's you need to be able to say, okay, what am I doing wrong? What can I do better? It's important to know as a teacher what you're doing and how you can improve, or maybe you need to chill out in a certain area. So just being open to analyzing yourself as a teacher is very important, and that was a big quality she said. Some points to remember about being a culturally responsive teacher are teachers should focus on the students and who they are. This includes all aspects of what makes up a student and how they view the world. So even religion plays a big role. Religion can oftentimes, students can view the world through the way that they have been taught through religion. So it's important to respect that and understand what their perspective is, and incorporate that into your understanding of the student as well. Every student is going to be different, so at the end of the day, as teachers, we have to remember that students aren't made from a cookie cutter. Everybody's different, and we need to embrace that difference and build on it. So that's very important to do as a culturally responsive teacher.